Bonus unit. Unit 10. Tracking strategy in real time. Setting targets on strategic factors. So, hello manager. This is Victor Marromo, your strategic planning and performance management coach. We've reached Unit 10. This unit is only a bonus unit and will be available only if you complete the previous 9 units in the Talent LMS website. At this point, now we can develop and measure a winning strategy. For most organizations, the task of tracking strategy is almost impossible. Sure, they know by undertaking a group of strategies, some results will follow, but they have never until now been able to link individual strategies to specific objectives. This whole course has shown how to do that. To link employee strategies to employee objectives, such as improved productivity and increased innovation, or how to link customer strategies to customer objectives, such as increased revenue, and so much. In this bonus chapter, we'd like to get a little bit further away. Wouldn't it be great if, in addition to tracking strategies against objectives, you could track the strategies themselves in real time? And I say in real time. You see, tracking strategy against objectives involves a lag in time. For example, let us say we improve customer service in a Hilton hotel. Our objectives have been to increase revenue from current customers by having them return and to increase the number of customers overall. The latter occurs when our current customers tell potential customers to stay at our hotel. But there's a lag here, a delayed reaction. It may be a couple of weeks or even months before the hotel's revenue stream improves as a consequence of the improvement in customer service. Shouldn't we also be tracking performance on customer service as well? Here's where strategic factors re-emerge. We can use them to monitor how strategy has been implemented, and we can use them as leading indicators of results on objectives. The concept of a leading indicator is simple. One indicator becomes a leading indicator of another if it predicts results on the latter. In our hotel example, measures of customer service, among many others, predict results on measures of revenue, and such are leading indicators. Measures of strategic factors become leading indicators of performance on objectives. Using this method will assist you greatly to monitor and predict your success. Leading indicators based on strategic factors. Let's look back at figure 5.4 showed here. Here we see objectives illustrated as arrows, going from the key stakeholders to the organization. From Unit 5, we now understand what these arrows mean and how to develop effective objectives. We also now understand how to develop key performance indicators on these objectives and set targets on these KPIs. What we want to do now is to see what use can be made of the arrows that travel in the opposite direction. These arrows are shown as strategic factors for customers, for employees, for suppliers, and for owners. So again, we are talking about strategic factors. So what do we have so far? We have KPIs that are based on objectives and targets set on these KPIs. We have strategy set on strategic factors that has been developed to achieve these targets. It makes complete sense. But what if we could develop measures on strategic factors themselves? What would this tell us about the performance of an organization or business unit? Steps to tracking strategy in real time. To track strategy in real time, you need to follow these steps. Step 1. Focusing on strategic factors. You may or may not wish to monitor your organization performance on all strategic factors relevant to a key stakeholder. This may be because not all of them have been impacted by your strategy. Take for example our good company Middleton Timber, which you already encountered in Unit 4. The strategic factors for its customers, the builders and owner builders are range of products, product quality, customer service, delivery, price and trade terms. Assessment on its performance with customers suggests that a company needs to focus on a narrow range of builders, cutting back on its range of products. It believes that competitive advantage will also be achieved by improving its performance on product quality, and it aims to lift its performance on delivery to become an industry benchmark. Finally, it is looking to raise its price for this narrower range of customers who appreciate high quality product and delivery that is second to none. From this description of Middleton Timber strategy, we can see two ways of tracking its performance. The first is by tracking results on its objective to increase revenue from customers. Middleton Timber hopes that by improving its performance on strategic factors identified in its strategy, it will increase its existing customers' purchases, attract additional new customers, and increase revenue. A second route it can take to monitor performance involves tracking the strategic factors identified in its strategy: range of products, product quality, delivery, and price. So, this second route entails developing key performance indicator and targets on these strategic factors, and this is a breakthrough. Step 2. Defining strategic factors. We cannot stress enough the importance of the second step. This step is crucial. If you produce clear definitions of your strategic factors, the measures will drop out easily. If, on the other hand, you attempt to develop measures without clear definitions, you and your team will struggle and maybe fail. Let's now look at how we might develop definitions of the strategic factors relevant to your organization's key stakeholders. There are at least 3 sources of definitions. Number 1, you can look around at how other organizations define strategic factors. For example, product quality. Number 2, you can, with your planning team, develop a definition of what you think a key stakeholder might mean by a strategic factor. Example, customer service. And 3, you can ask your key stakeholders themselves for their definition of a strategic factor. Example, range of products. And this, I think, between the 2 and 3 would be the best definition. All 3 have their place, but a problem arises if you only depend on the first 2 sources and do not employ the third, as I was saying. What are the dangers here? That the definitions may be completely at odds with what is appropriate for your organization or business unit. For example, product quality in the timber products industry is quite different from product quality in the healthcare industry. So, while you can learn from the way in which strategic factors are defined in other industries, you would be unwise to adopt their definitions without scrutinizing them intensively. Unwise adoption has distorted organization measures in very serious ways. Of course, at the end of the day, it's up to a planning team to decide which definitions are appropriate. So, the second source of definitions must come into play at some point. This is so whether the strategic factors are for customers, employees, suppliers, owners, or any other key stakeholder. Much discussion occurs in planning sessions as to what is meant by a strategic factor. Customer service is a good example. Your team may spend a lot of time discussing what it means in your industry. However, it doesn't matter how your team defines customer service if that definition is at odds with how your actual customers define it. Yet again and again, you'll find organizations and business units developing detailed definitions of strategic factors without reference to how their key stakeholders define them. It is for these reasons that you must be sure to employ the third source above. Be certain that the definitions you use are those that your relevant key stakeholders uses. You have to ask them. Bear in mind the 5 methods given previously for identifying strategic factors in Unit 4. Let's remember. Customer responses to performance, like letters, phone calls, conversations. These are ways to ask them. Sales force feedback, sales reports on product, service sales, Ask your sales force. Customer survey. Give them questionnaires, short interviews. Pick the phone or text them. Customer focus groups. This is a little bit more professional and it is very useful. Small group in-depth discussions and competitor activity. Changes in their performance. Step 3. Developing measures on strategic factors. The fundamental way to obtain clear definitions of strategic factors and develop measures on those factors is by interviewing your key stakeholders, as we were stating in step 2. To illustrate, consider the example of how we've developed measures on the strategic factors applicable to the customers of a company we will be calling Wakefield. Wakefield distributes gift products to retail stores, like shopping center gift shops. It has been increasingly buffeted by competition, and it's interesting to take note of its key strategic issues before considering how it developed measures on strategic factors. These issues are change to distribution system, overseas opportunities for growth, defining the core competencies of the organization, acquisition and new product development, exposure to seasonality, trends in sales, branding of products. We, their coaches, interviewed the owners of a sample of 16 retail stores to identify the strategic factors relevant to them. The results were price and margin, product range, customer service, delivery, packaging, and presentation. What do each of these mean? From its knowledge of the industry, Wakefield's planning team would be able to develop definitions on these factors. We would too, but the important definitions are those that come from the retailers themselves. So, asking the retailers, which is your customer, is precisely what we did. But we didn't stop there. Based on the definitions they gave, we next asked how they would suggest measuring each of them. A very rich amount of information was gathered. To illustrate, let's take one of the strategic factors and provide the retailer's definition of it. The factor is price and margin, and it had 6 components for measurement: dollar price, retail price minus purchase price, trading terms, discount, returns or exchanges, consistency of pricing. Immediately, we can see the richness of this definition. Retailers are concerned about price points, hence dollar price. Above, they know that the price should not exceed certain ranges appropriate to their stores, as this would impede their ability to sell the product. They also are concerned about price because it will affect turnover. So, while margin is important, a low margin, high volume product will beat a high margin product that hardly ever sells. The definition is also concerned with trading terms. In example, when retailers have to pay, as this affects the profitability of the transactions between them and Wakefield, Discounts for volume are another relevant point. They increase the margin available to retailers. Wayfield's policy on returns or exchanges also affects margin. And finally, the consistency of the price is important because customers dislike fluctuations. The retailers then provided clear measures for the strategic factor price and margin based on the definition above. So, please go out and talk to your customers. Let them define the strategic factors. What is for them price and margin? In this case, price and margin included 6 important items for them. So, please keep that in mind. Step 4. Developing key performance indicators, KPIs, on strategic factors. It is certainly obvious how important it is to get inside the head of your key stakeholders, like we described in step 3. Once you do, you see the world from their perspective. You're then in a much better position to develop relevant definitions and measures. The example below lists KPIs for strategic factors for farmers of Griffin Irrigation, an actual organization which we assisted with planning and measurement, although its name has been changed. Griffith Irrigation is a government-owned and a natural monopoly. This means that when it comes to the supply of water to farmers in this region, there is little competition or none. Griffith Irrigation takes water from nearby cities and rivers and distributes it via large canals. From these large canals, narrow channels run alongside farmers' properties. Griffith Irrigation staff open gates on the channels and let the water flood onto the farmers' properties. There are meters on the gates that measure the amount of water each farm receives. The strategic factors for farmers are customer service, water quality, prices. The farmers are the customers of Griffith Irrigation. Customer service is defined as the extent to which water orders are filled on time. This means that Griffith Irrigation staff have to open the gate that leads to a farmer's property on the date he ordered, and close the gate when the ordered quantity of water has been discharged into the farm. Water quality is defined as the extent to which water meets certain criteria. It is analyzed for contaminants such as pesticides, salts, and for the existence of grass seeds. Water prices are a positive factor if they are seen to be fair in relation to the service rendered. These factors are abbreviated versions. These definitions are shown in the figure 10.1. KPIs on strategic factor for farmers. These strategic factors came to the fore in actual interviews with the farmers, who also supplied the definitions, and this is very important, and nominated the measures that would be appropriate for each strategic factor. Note the column KPI. This is your table for the definitions made by the farmers. We've moved from defining and collecting measures from farmers to developing KPIs. In the step sequence, we've come to step 4. Reduce the list of measures to develop key performance indicator KPIs. Figure 10.1 shows the results of this reduction. In the table, customer service is defined as getting water orders on time to customers. The definition by the farmers. This is measured by 2 KPIs: percentage of water orders on time and percentage of farmers satisfied with service. Both objective and subjective measures are brought together here. The objective measure, percentage of water orders on time, is supplemented by a subjective measure based on farmers' perception of customer service. Water quality is defined as physical and chemical tests of water to meet standard. Again, there are 2 KPIs related to that definition. The first is percentage of quality tests between receivables and discharges that meet standard. Results on this measure are derived from the chemical and physical testing of the water between the time it is taken from rivers to the time it is discharged into farms. Testing involves detecting chemicals in the water or weed seeds and other contaminants present in the water. The second KPI for water quality is subjective, based on the farmer's perception of the water quality. So we are talking here about the farmer's definitions translated to percentages in the KPIs, which ones are objective and others are subjective. Water prices simply refers to the price of water delivered to the farm. It is measured by 2 measures, one of which requires some explanation. The first measure is dollar total operations and maintenance costs, while the second is percentage rating on price compared to comparable irrigation organizations. On the surface, it may seem odd to have a measure of prices in terms of costs. However, we need to understand the way in which prices are established by Griffith irrigation. The price per megaliter of water is set by taking the total costs for the organization, adding a margin and dividing it by the megaliters used. The price of water is therefore firmly linked to total operations and maintenance costs. The situation arises because Griffith Irrigation is a cost recovery entity and government owned. It needs to keep its costs down in order to keep its prices competitive. This is very, very important in government or public organizations like Griffith Irrigation. To assess whether its prices are competitive, Griffith Irrigation has also developed KPI that rates its price compared to similar irrigation organizations. As one of its objectives, Griffith Irrigation seeks to grow revenue. To do this, it has to do well on strategic factors relevant to farmers, like, as we have stated, customer service, water quality, and water prices. Farmers will then stay with this particular organization and not seek to substitute its method of irrigation with alternative technology. If it falls down on these strategic factors, the farmers will start looking for other ways of obtaining water for their crops. The result will of course be a decline in revenue for Griffith irrigation. It is clear from this example on the farmers and Griffith irrigation that on the strategic factors for farmers we are able to predict future revenue. Thus KPIs on customer service, water quality and water prices become leading indicators of the KPI, revenue from farmers. And this, my manager and managers, is a breakthrough. Setting targets on KPIs. Step 5. Figure 10.2 contains the strategic factors and the KPIs from Figure 10.1. The definitions from the latter have been deleted and a column called Target has been added. If you run your eye down the column, you'll see how specific quantities have been set for the KPIs in the adjacent column. For example, for the KPI percentage of water orders on time, two targets have been set: 90% in 2 days and 100% in 4 days. There are at least 4 influences that come to bear in establishing targets like that, as Figure 10.3 illustrates. One influence shown in Figure 10.3 is performance last period. For example, the target on water quality in Figure 10.2, more than 90% of our farmers rate our water quality highly suitable for irrigation, was set by looking at the previous satisfaction level, which was less than 90%. The target of 90% reflects the desire to improve performance on this strategic factor of water quality. A second influence is imperatives. Often, these are financial, such as return on shareholders' funds, but they don't have to be. In the case of Griffith irrigation, Figure 10.2 highlights the absolute need to fill water orders. If they aren't filled, crops die, and the very existence of the authority is threatened. This certainly sounds like an imperative. So the targets 90% in 2 days and 100% in 4 days come about because water simply has to be delivered. There is no other choice. A third influence on target setting is benchmarking, which involves comparing one organization with another best practice organization in order to equal its performance, and if possible, exceed it. The aim has led Griffith Irrigation to establish the target top 10% of comparable irrigators. On the strategic factor of water prices. Its aim is to be competitive on price, to such an extent that it places itself in the top 10% of irrigation organizations and companies. Staying with Figure 10.3, we note that the fourth influence on target setting is targets on other KPIs. In other words, targets are set on one KPI through knowledge of targets on another. There is a cause and effect relationship, and in the next section we will cover this in detail. This aspect of target setting is new, is the mapping I was talking about in Unit 9. And in dealing with it, we're at the leading edge of this field. So, this is why Unit 10 is a bonus unit, because it really possesses valuable information. Objectives, strategic factors, and cause and effect relationship. We've seen from the example of refit irrigation how objectives can be set for a particular key stakeholder. Strategy written and performance on the strategic factors monitored. We've seen these linkages for one key stakeholder, farmers. There are also linkages between key stakeholders, so that in the case of refit irrigation, results for employees, for example, drive results for suppliers, farmers, and other key stakeholders. This is an exciting idea, another way to track strategy through linkages between key stakeholders or mapping between key stakeholders. Figure 10.4 illustrates this graphically. We see here how strategic factors and objectives are linked for a single key stakeholder, example, employees, and how objectives for one key stakeholder are linked to strategic factors for another key stakeholder. Our method has been employed in a very innovative way to look at cause and effect between KPIs for different key stakeholders. This is our mapping of KPIs. Let's read a figure from left to right, starting with employees. Strategy for them drives KPIs on strategic factors, for example, percentage rating against reward system benchmark. In turn, the KPIs on strategic factors drives the KPIs on objectives, for example, percentage productivity. Now, number 2. So, for refit irrigation, to track the success of its employee strategy, it can check its effect on KPIs on strategic factors as well as its impact on KPIs on objectives. But there's a flow-on effect from this strategy, as we see illustrated by the arrows moving out from KPIs on objectives. Performance on these affect the KPIs on strategic factors for farmers and for suppliers. So the success of refit irrigation employee strategy is evident in the KPIs on strategic factors and objectives for employees, as well in KPIs throughout this model. So, Figure 10.4 illustrates how supplier strategy 2 can be tracked. Just to give another example, it can be done directly on the KPIs applicable to suppliers, but it can also be done on those for farmers. To reiterate, the impact of strategy can be detected by impact on other key stakeholders. While cause and effect in the figure move from left to right, targets are set from right to left. We see this in figure 10.5. Suppose, for example, Griffith Irrigation has set a target to increase revenue from farmers by 25 million. With implications of that flowing from right to left, it's clear that a target which is based on the KPIs, dollars revenue from farmers, the point or parenthesis 6, impacts on targets for the KPIs on strategic factor for farmers. Here the KPIs is percentage of water orders on time, the parenthesis 5. The target set on this KPI then affects targets established on KPIs on objectives for suppliers, such as percentage of deliveries on time, parenthesis 4, and KPIs on objectives for employees, such as percentage productivity, parenthesis 2. These and other linkages are illustrated by the arrow in figure 10.5. Please study figure 10.4 and 10.5 2 or 3 times until you get it right. So, it is that knowledge of the cause and effect between strategy for one key stakeholder and that for others leads to a way of linking the targets for the former with those for the others. We've seen a remarkable way to track strategy, both in real time, via the immediately impact strategic factor, and in a delayed way as shown in the model in figure 10.4. Please read the short case study on Sears Roebuck. It is very clarifying. Strategy for all key stakeholders. This course started by stressing the importance of identifying the key stakeholders of an organization or business unit. We kept this theme constant throughout the units. In this unit, and especially in figure 10.4, its importance is very obvious and noted. Strategy for one affects strategy for others. There is a dependence, and I highlight dependence, between key stakeholders, and recognizing it is essential in developing strategy and tracking its success. To develop strategy for only one key stakeholder and take the others for granted is to invite our old friend Mr. Failure. Yet, this is precisely what is happening when organizations concentrate only on the requirements of their shareholders and ignore the needs of their customers, or focus on customers and overlook the needs of their employees, or concentrate on customers and employees and take suppliers just for granted. I've seen a lot of organizations and case studies who fail because of this paragraph. Our strategic factor method recognizes the interdependence of key stakeholders, anticipates their needs, and develops strategy for them. As can be seen in this unit, it also enables the tracking of strategy in real time and assists it in tracing its impact on organization or business unit key stakeholders. This tracking can be made in the app Track, which are very important for visualization. If you like assistance in developing and linking your key performance indicators for your organization or business unit, our company has developed software and apps that not only takes you through the process, but helps you to investigate cause and effect relationships between KPIs, or as we were talking about, the mapping of KPIs. If you want to take this further and link several business units throughout your organization, we have this kind of help that facilitates this task. Information on these products is available. Please contact me. I will be very glad to help or assist. How to ensure that the strategy gets acted upon and is implemented effectively is the subject of the next unit, which is also a bonus unit. So, manager, thank you for listening to Victor Marroma, your strategic planning and performance management coach. Please keep in mind that if you understand this real cause and effect and mapping of KPIs throughout your key stakeholders, your case of success will be highly incremented. Thank you, and see you in the next chapter. Goodbye.